You for taking the time to join us. Today is Tuesday, the 2nd of September, 2025, and we're focused on a digital world town hall. I'm grateful for those that are in attendance from all around the world. We also have a live audience with us. We'll be focusing on advancements over the last week and then any kind of general Q&A as to any of the advancements or any topics that folks want to bring up. Grateful for those co-hosts that are always consistent and with us. We're grateful for the understanding that we are spirits and in physical bodies, and that things are usually created spiritually before they're created physically. We'll go ahead and get open up today with a prayer from Wally, and then go from there. So thank you. Wally?
Our Father in heaven, we are grateful for this opportunity we have to be together this evening, this afternoon, or this morning. And we ask you to please bless us with inspiration and with guidance. We are grateful for our free agency and for the opportunity we have to make choices of our own and control our own lives. We are grateful for Michael's efforts and for the digital world. We ask blessings that we can know what we need to do to help spread the word and to help this grow and become the platform that we know it can be. We ask for blessings for those who are suffering and for those who are in need. And these things we humbly pray for in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
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 Thank you for all you do, Wally, and for all you stand for. It's appreciated, and then some. For those that might not be aware, the digital world is based on a private membership association, which actually enables private memberships to be acknowledged and understood worldwide, to actually have a formal ability to incorporate and to operate, whether they're trusts, whether they're businesses, whether they're associations. There's other different vehicles, but it's important for us to understand that it's a gift from our Creator to be able to be here on earth and to be able to have choice and the freedom that comes with that. And along with that enables privacy. But privacy is not something that is just to be done in the dark somewhere, but to be done in transparent. And the technology that comes along with that, we're grateful for. For those that need it, some of the things we're talking about, even though we've been talking about them for decades, almost many, many decades, they may be forward-looking, as a lot of this will take a lifetime to build. But we're grateful for the life and the ability to, again, know that we're spirits in these physical bodies to be able to create and build. We're also grateful for the knowledge that we understand the counterbalance to what is light versus dark, and decentralized versus centralized. And what we're talking about are secret combinations that basically come together and intend to take away choice, to take away freedoms, to bond or take away the will of others. And so we're grateful for that knowledge. We also recognize the different ecosystems. We won't go through them. There's a lot here. But to understand that there is a private and a public element. Some of us see some of these secret combinations. Some of us don't. Some of us are starting to understand it. But regardless, we're grateful for the knowledge and understanding that what it is. We're also grateful for the understanding that decentralization is a true and correct principle, something that is in with each one of us, each person, how we were created, how this universe operates, the simple things of life as well as what we may perceive as complex. Decentralization and the intelligence that naturally operates at the cellular level. It's real. We can't, people can say, I don't believe this or I don't believe that, but the net is, it's all how we're here. You can call it evolution, you can call it spiritual basis, it's up to you, but the net, we're grateful for that term that we call decentralization and what's given the opportunity for the digital world to actually exist in a realm that hasn't thus far in life. For those that are not aware, it operates in a really simple way. An individual downloads an app, which I'll show you a couple different life apps here in the future. The life app basically gives you 12 words, in this case 24, and then it links with you from a biological standpoint. not something that's invasive and not something that is centrally controlled or given to someone else. It's basically you as an individual connecting with a token or a combination of those that basically then has derived keys. Those derived keys replace passwords and usernames and basically enable the individual to own their own identity in the digital world. It's really important to understand what that means, and those are some of the things that we walk through in these meetings. Today, I want to just talk a little bit about connecting the physical. We just talked a little bit about the spiritual side of it and how things are created spiritual before physically. In between that physical and spiritual is this digital realm that we're talking about, which is actually being created. And we'll talk about parts and pieces of that today. The biggest thing I want to really focus in on is identity and derived keys and the importance of identity and derived keys and how they enable payments. But we'll talk about payments as we kind of move forward. One of the biggest things that it's advancing is what we call Utah Life, which is a pilot within the state of Utah. And this pilot is literally focused on privacy first. You know, for those that may not know Utah, Utah is full of a bunch of Mormons. They're also really known as members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. What people may not know is they've come across the plains of the United States of America after migrating across seas, and they're known as pioneers. There's actually a day, 24th of July, that's dedicated for the pioneers. But one of the reasons they came to Utah was actually to be able to exist and be able to make choices, and in a format of privacy. Some folks may not know that there's a gentleman named Joseph Smith who was actually killed while he was running for president of the United States. I didn't know that until like 10, maybe it was 15 years ago. But the combination of being able to be free and private is a very important thing. As a matter of fact, the founding fathers of the United States of America actually came here to be able to have religious freedoms. Now, I'm not saying or pushing the particular Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints on anybody. And those of you that know me, you know that that's not a stance that I personally take or think is central to really the work that is built around what's called the digital world. But I do think it's important to address that, to understand why, because Utah is actually where these folks settled. And it's a big part of the fabric of why Utah is actually standing up. And it's not just a group of folks or a group of, organizations within Utah that say, you know what, we want to come together and we want to actually recognize decentralized identity, decentralized payments, etc. But the actual state of Utah has actually passed these laws. There's actually 6 laws that have been passed, all built on this particular law, which is around individual identity, as well as this House Bill 470. These things are very, very important, I believe, legal tools or acts that will actually help to set humanity free. And I believe it'll do it in such a way where Utah will actually be a leader in that. And one of the things that's actually come out this last week, or actually today, a couple hours ago, is actually an opportunity to have what's called a state-endorsed digital identity. So this document actually came out today, and the state of Utah is actually exploring the potential of endorsing digital identity based upon these laws and a couple others that will enable the state to actually step back from issuing identity to validating or enabling identity through a type of endorsement process. That is a massive step. And for those of you that have been involved in these digital world town halls for many, many years and watched as we've moved from the centralized focus that we had for over 15 years, from the 90s all the way until 2008, to the decentralized focus starting in 2009, you know that we've been around the world. Some of you have followed us to many, many, many countries, and you've seen us try to find, and I'll actually pull up the Digital World's website. Actually, not that one, digital. I'm going to go to this one here, and I'm just going to go over this map, because the gray in the middle actually represents the Pacific, which is almost half of the world. This map doesn't represent it, right? But imagine first phase, we go and meet with a lot of different countries, kingdoms, cultures, nations. And for those of you that remember, Tuvalu signed up first, and then many others within the Pacific signed up. For those that may not be aware, I'll go ahead and pull those up. 40 billion acres, 25,000 islands, Polynesian, Melanesian, and Micronesian based. These are some of the first that actually signed up to be a part of this digital world and to basically free their citizens or their nationals or their members, depending on how you look at it. And when we look at what's going on within the digital world, we see these other nations that are out there. So you kind of see this phase 1 within the Pacific, phase 2, and phase 3. If you notice, phase 3 is actually touching on the BRICS countries, which before COVID broke out, we actually personally traveled to each one of the BRICS countries except for one of them. And the net is there's an opportunity for all of us on this amazing earth, this wonderful earth that we get to share this environment with, to be able to come together and govern ourselves. And so when we talk about not just Utah and the laws that are based in Utah and the different organizations or the different counties, which now there's actually 9 counties. I got off a call with one of them. They're not even listed. Oh no, they are. They're listed right here. I got off a call earlier today with one of them that's just so excited because they really see it as an opportunity to really provide not just value to their county, but also driving revenues and services to organizations and people around the world. And they're finally starting to get it. And it's just neat to see not just the people, but also the organizations all coming together in an environment of unity, in an environment of helping one's neighbor, and to see it even in Utah. It's really neat to be able to see this happen, and not just the pilot taking shape and legislation taking shape, but the state actually saying, we want to understand this state endorsed digital identity. Let's go ahead and proceed to understand more. For those that are not aware, again, I'll restate, we're in the beginning of September 2nd, 2025. And on October 7th, we will actually have the opportunity to focus with many other states. So the state of Utah is actually hosting, along with this Utah Valley University, a lot of different states to come right here to Utah. So all states within the United States of America have been formally invited, and this will happen on October 17th. And it's an invitation-only type event. There's 2 or 3 states that we've already worked with that we also have reached out to. And what the goal is to really show how technology can actually provide that bridge that humanity really needs, where the individual can be accountable for their identity. If they don't care about it, they doesn't have to, right now, do people care about their identity or their credit or their XYZ? The system does, regardless of whether they want to. But I believe that's because the technologies and the tools haven't been there to enable the individual to actually do that. So for one of the first times ever, we'll literally have this state-endorsed digital identity summit. This is the first summit, October 17th here in Utah, inviting many other different organizations from around the world, namely technologists and folks that would be in the decision-making process around how specifically states actually recognize ID and then how they could potentially peer together. So for those that may not understand, private membership associations, just like I talked about before, are actually a protected entity under the First, Second, Fourth, and Fifth, and I want to say Ninth Amendments in the United States of America. Also in the state of Utah, there's additional legislation. I'll actually show it to you here real fast. This legislation right here, this private membership association, is actually an act that gives not just individuals, but businesses the opportunity to be able to assemble and to be able to act. Now, they can't do things that are against the law, so to speak, or not right. We need to do unto the one as we've done unto the other, or have undone to us as we would do unto another. The point being is, imagine an environment where, and I'll give you some examples. There's some secret combinations that follow this private membership association structure. I'll give you some specifics, or actually I'll just talk about associations in general. We talk about the bar, the legal system, that actually structures under a private membership association. When we talk about folks that may be in the medical profession, when you take an exam, you're joining it. Same thing with CPA type environments. Same thing with drivers, DMVs. So many folks may say, DMVs, why would a DMV be a part of a private membership association? Well, they are, and then what they do is they get states to join each one. So when the state has a association or a relationship with a department of motor vehicle, have you ever questioned why there's a different registration for a vehicle versus an individual, and how those records and those departments are usually kept separate? I know in small cities sometimes they combine them, but those are all private membership associations. It just so happens it's not just in the US either. That driver's license association actually ties from Canada to the US, and then there's ones over in Europe, all over. But the question is, could I go and, let's say, go to Taipei, Taiwan, and drive on a driver's license from, let's say somewhere in the Middle East, or maybe even Utah? Utah is usually pretty recognized around the world, but there's reasons why that is the case. There's also reasons why, there's over 100,000 individuals that have actually been married within the state of Utah, digitally, cryptographically, from around the world. First place to do it, and it actually started here. It started with some of the individuals that are on this pilot here as well. But the point that I'm driving at is the recognition of states to be able to recognize another state with a type of endorsement is really key. So the ability for Utah to set a precedence and say, hey, this could be done in this way, and then to help other states to actually endorse that on their own and then counter recognize that. For instance, think about it this way, and this doesn't tie to private membership association, but the right to actually bear arms. Some concealed weapon permits could actually be recognized in a different state. And then it went state to state, state to multi-state. And then some states just said, you know what, we don't even care. We don't care if you have one somewhere else. If you're welcome to conceal. The point that I'm trying to communicate is when organizations or entities start working together and actually recognizing different jurisdictions and then processes and then law, and connecting it in such a way where the individual actually becomes free, it becomes very valuable. One of the things that I'd like to talk about is, and this may be the first time that the world is actually seeing this, is the digital treasury. So the digital treasury is an ecosystem that comprises multiple different exchanges, and not just exchanges, but also markets. So a market is a little bit different than an exchange, but in turns, they basically can fulfill different types of systems or processes using the same types of underlying technology, namely the digital world chain. So we're going to dig into a couple of these different systems, and then see if there's other folks that actually want to come in and work with us on building future ones. I'll start with Alpine Gold Exchange. This is actually an ecosystem, which, by the way, since our last meeting, we have a new, let's see if this is it. Yeah, this is it. We have a new state that's actually gotten their own gold. So if you can't see the camera, these represent 100, a 25, 100, a 50, then a 25, then a 10, then a 5, then a 2, then a 1, then a half. For those of you that may not be aware, these are basically, here, I'll actually pull out, so I'm going to show you the different sizes. So you basically, let's say you take a $100 bill. So if you've got a $100 gold bill versus a $100 bill, you can kind of see the difference in size there, okay? But when this burns up, it burns up into nothing. When this burns up, it's actually, this is 1/10 of 1 troy ounce of gold. 1 troy ounce of gold today is actually $3,700, and no, that's not the right screen for that, but it's about $3,700 and change, which makes this $100 instrument basically about $670 in US dollars if you were to convert it. So what we're looking at is a digital representation of that. In this particular instance here, This is with Alpine Gold Exchange. And I need to preface that this is all very new technology, and there's a lot of things that actually have to go through rigorous testing before this is launched into the wild. But you can see here, this actually represents a Goldback 1 unit. The value is not $6.70. It's actually $6.68 today. So you can see that it's kind of gone down just a little bit here. But the point that I'm trying to articulate is this is a digital medium where an individual can actually log in. So I'll give you an example. So I'm going to go ahead and click here. I'm going to go ahead and open up. By the way, there's a lot of new apps that are out if people haven't seen them. So you can actually download apps, and this will continue to get populated over time for Apple. Now these are the Life apps. Okay, so they're all interchangeable. Doesn't matter the jurisdiction, doesn't matter the operating system. So you've got African. Well, I won't even talk about stuff that's not there. American, Canadian, Pacific. Those are all live, as well as Arabian. I'll show you some of those today. And there's different organizations that basically will help facilitate, manage, run, operate. And if anybody on this call wants to manage an exchange or a node, you're welcome to it. Just reach out. We'll point you in the right direction and you can get it set up. These are actually Apple-based apps that are in a local type market. Okay, so Clear Life, Hawaiian Life, Utah Life, which is what I just logged in with. And there's a couple others. We'll just leave it at that. If you're running Android, so those are the prior are for Apple. These are for Android if you're not using a ClearPhone. If you're using a ClearPhone, then these are actually pre-installed on your actual phone. I'm not going to talk about Clear ID. There's so much beauty there that I will actually save that for the future. But these are apps that basically an individual would log in. You go ahead and say, I want to log in. Again, there's no usernames, no passwords. So we're going to go ahead and log in. It was successful there. So you can, on this particular phone, you can see that I've already set up multiple wallets: Utah wallet, Clear wallet, digital wallet, Hawaiian wallet, etc. So we'll go ahead and log into, what's nice is in this interface, I'm just going to say Utah. Okay. So you can see there's just a couple different assets in here, but you'll also see there's different wallets up top. And then you can even bounce through. So if I select different wallets, you can basically see different assets. You'll notice it's switching there. So you can also come down to this wallet section here and see a particular value of each wallet and then a combination of all of them. And then you can also drill into, like, let's say you want to look at particular assets within a particular wallet and see the details. It builds all of that in. Something else that is new and unique within this environment is also the ability to add other assets. So what we're showing you here is basically a screen that has accounts, assets, currencies, equities, commodities, cryptos, rewards, and bonds. Now imagine if you actually wanted to see or build up a life and then pass it to your progenitor or to your posterity. Literally, the ability to actually pass this from generation of time without having central authorities is all built into it. So I'll go ahead and jump around. Notice how the balances also shift. It shows you where you've actually got your diversification. Maybe it's in cryptos, maybe it's in rewards. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to add a commodity. So I'll go ahead and add a particular asset. And there's a couple different ways to do it. Right now, I'm just going to show you one unique way. So again, I'm using no usernames, no passwords, 5 factors. This is actually doing a separate step. So it actually verifies on this particular device here. Let's see. Yep. So you can go and add other assets. I want to show, let's see here. So what I've just gone through is a couple different features and functions within one environment. Some other environments may have more and some may have less. For instance, the digital world will have a lot of other things. You know, if you want to look at businesses, I don't think this profile has any in this particular environment. If you want to look at maybe disputes or certificates or licenses, you know, let's say you want to look at a birth certificate or you want to, you know, et cetera. So I think you understand what I'm driving at, but we just went from one jurisdiction of the digital world that has another jurisdiction within it of the Alpine Gold Exchange. Now they may be focused primarily on metals, for instance, if we dig into these assets, we can kind of see the metals that are available. So gold, silver, goldbacks, different types of treasuries, some that are from Alpine Gold, some that are other treasuries, but the ability to be able to have those managed. And here's another unique thing. Let's say you want to actually transfer. So you can see here, can it actually transfer with anything? No. Can this transfer with anything? It can't transfer over here, but if we transfer it here, it automatically pulls up the ability, go ahead and say 2 here, to go ahead and transfer those assets. So I'm going to go ahead and just show you how that actually works. And this is actually a phone that I just recently set up, but we'll see here. Login successful, good to go. So basically what you do is you see that transfer happen and you see the balances shifting in real time. You can also see what trading pairs are there. You can also double click and then send or swap or receive, so to speak. So I'm going to go ahead and go back. That's the Alpine Exchange. Some of the other ones, Mexican Exchange, same types of functions, a little bit less features and functions. They may do some other things that are not in a different environment. This is another one within the Arabian environment. So this is 22 countries within the exchange of, so this is tied to the unions. If you're not familiar with what that is, I'm going to go ahead and pull up Americas, and I'm going to scroll down to a bunch of different, oops, wrong one. There we go. So when I scroll down, what you'll do is you'll see a couple different exchange or unions here. So these unions are basically the Pacific Union, which was the smallest, which is where we started. If you don't remember, that's this environment here. And then the Arabian Union, which there's actually 28 members inside the Pacific Union that we met with. Currently, there's about 22 union members within the Arabian environment. The Arabian environment is very, very different than most other environments. They primarily tie to assets that are focused on oil and gold are the two primaries. And then there's other elements that are also tied to that. One thing, like notice how you can actually transact from, like, let's say this Hawaiian dollar can actually go into goldbacks, or it can go into digital Bitcoin or digital BTC, or into different other assets associated with that. So the point that I'm trying to articulate is there's different exchanges in different jurisdictions all around the world based upon these different unions that represent all of humanity. So about 8 billion people is what this totally entails. And it does it in a way that is absolutely about the individual. So an individual is the one that logs in. There's no central environment. You know, you can look at it from the Hawaiian inside of it. So this is one of the first as well in the Pacific. You can see it. I want to say Mexico is a pretty solid one that's up and coming. And then one thing that actually went live recently is the American environment, which we won't talk about. And hopefully by the time this next week comes around, we'll have folks to sponsor the Canadian environment. By the way, there's a live audience here. Is there anybody, I'm just going to throw this out there, is there anybody on here that actually wants to sponsor the Canadian environment and help get that going? Thoughts? And if not, just ping me on the after hours. So
what does that mean to sponsor an environment?
Well, help to be able to bring it up. So there's servers, there's storage, there's infrastructure, you know, and basically raise a hand within a particular environment, say, I want to be a part of that. You don't necessarily have to live there, but it's the ability to be able to stand it up and go through different processes. I'm going to go ahead and build this one back up, to represent it, to operate it, to run it, just kind of like you would run a node, but you're actually running an exchange. So they're decentralized exchanges. They're an interface that ties to the digital world, which is what this is all about, right? So this whole system, people are like, well, what is it? Why do you need governance? What's the different nations? What do the councils do? Well, the services are pretty self-explanatory. You can register patents, trademarks, companies, corporations, assets, marriages, mortgages, if you've got disputes. If you want to get credit cards, if you want to get councils or communications, wallets, different organizations, maybe there's a notary process. There's different services, and some can say, we'll stand up 3 of the 20 or whatever. But so the digital world basically offers that. There's providers. So currently there's service providers. There's a bunch of them, but the ability to have folks that actually say, I want to get involved in a particular region and maybe provide some form of a service. So there's different, there's liquidity services, there's technical services. Think about a node, but it does not just validating and storage and witnessing, but it does the transacting side of it as well. So there's a lot that ties to it. It's really providing some of the different developed technology in an infrastructure way. So that's basically what it is. So there's no pressure to it. We're just finding different folks from around the world that actually want to help to build that. And they build it within this framework of this treasury environment. So, whether it's one environment or multiple environments. So here you can see maybe different markets or states. You can see different types of life apps or vaults, or, kind of like what I was showing you here with the gold bag. So this is a service provider that basically delivers a type of real world money that vendors can actually use. But what if there's a digital version of it, and then they can convert that into whatever currency they're in their respective parts of the world? So basically providing these types of services, features, and functions and integrations along the way. And this represents those different regions. So the numbers that we looked at here basically tie in to what we're looking at here as well. So I don't know if this is making sense to folks, but jurisdiction's a very, very important part of it. The exchanges are a very important part of it. What we're seeing here is just the start of a couple different exchanges that I kind of walked you through. So the digital world, the Mexican exchange, the American exchange, hopefully the Canadian exchange, the Hawaiian exchange, those are all getting stood up real time. There'll also be some unique things that will tie to other environments, such as one of the big things that we actually worked through this last week was with an organization that I believe will have a massive impact. Many, many tens of thousands of employees in multiple markets around the world. And I think they'll lead the path around tokenizing real estate. So there's going to be a lot of pressure within the commercial business where loans are coming due, people are selling businesses, people are selling land, people are selling square footage, and they're either not selling or they are selling. And then on the flip side of it, there's going to be platforms where organizations want to actually put money into real world assets. When we talk about real world assets, some people look at this type of thing and say, it's printed money or it's USD in a digital or a money-based account, but it doesn't really have true transparency as to where it is, how it was spent, when it was spent, how many there are. But when we can start understanding those basic things while respecting the privacy of the individual, it provides a very powerful way future for humanity. So I won't go through the details of this as some of those are still being built out, but understanding really this interface. I'll just jump back into this one here and go to assets, where we've got accounts, asset, currencies, equities, commodities, cryptos, rewards, and bonds. When you understand how these things can actually tie, and there may be, again, you got different wallets, different amounts, you can see where you can actually tie in, for instance, maybe an asset of a building, maybe it's a vehicle, maybe it's a home, maybe it's a portion of a home. Maybe people talk about the future of timeshare. We've kind of seen that happen over the last 50 years where, maybe Hilton is selling a percentage, maybe a week of a room, but think about it in a whole nother level. The digital world enables this in a real world construct where a lot of organizations have been talking about it, but most of them have actually been centralizing the process. And I'll give you a good example. Trillions of dollars of not only real estate, kind of like what we're talking about here, but also stocks and bonds and EFTs are all being converted by the New World Economic Forum leader or chairman or whatever you want to call him, Larry Fink, who basically, in my opinion, a large portion, and I won't be specific in this medium, but a large portion of folks basically took over certain environments, either killed companies with naked short selling, or they basically bet something that they don't have. And in the reality is they win if it goes up, they win if it goes down. But it really isn't a fair playing ground for humanity. That's one thing in Wall Street or the stock market. Another thing is based upon just general currencies in and of themselves. If you understand issuance, you understand interbank changes, or just interbanking in general, or if you even understand the stock market systems behind the Wall Street systems that connect all of these, the transparency is not honest. The risk and reward is not balanced. The individuals that actually want to participate as an individual, which is what the stock markets were set up for originally, they're not represented in a way that is transparent and honest. When you have cryptographic assets like this, there is much more. I'm not saying that someone can't make a claim that something is something that it's not, but you have some transparency around, was it sent? Is there a definitive quantity? Is there, how long was it held by one? So understanding that as it relates to tokenizing or creating a digital twin of assets is really important, because we're in a generation where these will become reality. The question is, who's going to be involved in it? How's it going to be involved? And will it be centralized along the way? So these are a bunch of just different exchanges that are being stood up within the digital treasury. We're grateful for those folks that have stood up and said, you know what, I built multiple treasuries in the past, and I would be honored to build one that's actually going to provide true transparency for the future. So grateful for those individuals from around the globe that are caring about that, involved in that. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and pause and let our live audience ask any kind of questions that they may have. It's good to see some of the new faces here, as well as some of the ones that have stuck with us for a long time. Any thoughts or comments or feedback as to what you've seen so far?
I have a question, Michael.
Please.
So is the point of having different wallets because they have different assets, commodities, currencies, whatever in them, different things in them, or?
It's really good question. So for those that may have not heard it, why is there so many different wallets, and what's the difference? And the difference is they have a different base currency based upon the region that they're in. For instance, the Mexican wallet versus the Canadian wallet versus the Australian wallet versus the American wallet, they may have different assets. So for instance, all of these may have a baseline different asset that's built into the Life app that's tied to them. So if an organization, let's see if I can find one here. This is the version 1. We have a couple different versions, but if an organization actually downloads a Life app, they have the ability to have different currencies. So the base currency in the Canadian exchange would be the Canadian digital dollar or equivalent. The base asset in the Hawaiian exchange would be the dala. The Mexican one would be the digital peso, etc. So the base asset is actually different. Now you can go in and actually say you want to actually look at it. You could, let's give you an example here. For instance, here's a couple different wallets within this environment. Let's go ahead and go into the wallets. You can see that this one is the one wallet. This is another wallet. They have different balances, different assets. And you'll actually see, for instance, in this particular wallet, you can see it's a USD based one. You can see in this particular one, you've got the dollar is based on it as well. So does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Other thoughts or comments or observations or questions or?
I have a question.
Please.
So with different jurisdictions that we have inside of the digital world, will each jurisdiction be managing their own disputes before they kind of get escalated?
That's a great question.
If that is the,
That's a great question. And the answer should absolutely be yes. And that's one of the value-added services. For instance, in some environments, it may be a language barrier. It may be even a legal barrier. There may be laws. For instance, let's take the Arabian Union versus the Pacific Union. There may be different laws that they actually have. For instance, in the Arabian environment, one of the things that they focus on is Sharia law, which they say there should not be any interest that gets charged when something is loaned. And so the way that they look at banking is very different than you would in a different environment. I can actually say the Pacific Union, some of the in Aotearoa or Rarotonga or even Samoa or Tonga, I can tell you their paradigm and the spirit and intent is aligned with that, but they may be based upon, it's a different construct, so to speak. So for instance, someone says, hey, we would like to grow some pineapples or coconuts. And they say, go ahead and use the land. It's just, there is the paradigm of what you see within a Western world is just different. So when you look at it from a Western standpoint, maybe in an American environment, the legal structure around disputes, maybe there is a thing called a class action suit. Maybe there is a thing, let's see if I can there actually is one. So you can actually create a class action suit. You can go through a process. You can have other people that actually want to join it. And then if it's actually won or not, if it's won, you can actually get the payout that actually comes, and payouts will also get disseminated to the wallets. It's all automated. There's no centralized system that does those types of things. And so if within a region, if they want to use that system, and if they want to even have councils, John, would you take a task to ping G2 to pull those errors and understand why they're there? Because these are actually working. Let's see, authorization missing. Oh, that's because there's a code that's got to pop in there. That's why. So my point is let's say that they want to run councils within a particular region, and let's say that they want to manage how disputes are actually run by those councils, because that's actually really, this council side of it is actually really what it's about. How you can actually have different councils that will basically do different things and such. So, and by the way, for those that are not aware, I'm gonna log out and show you that there's actually two different versions. So we've actually moved from a stable version that ties with this L1 login. So that's a stable environment that most of you are already familiar with. And then we're launching this new version 2, which is still in beta stage. So that's actually what I'm operating out of right now. So, but does that answer your question around regions,
Yes.
jurisdiction, and
so
disputes?
just to clarify, if someone was moving their funds between two different ecosystems, then those two ecosystems jurisdictions would manage that particular transaction dispute, even though they might have used a particular currency to buy another currency and then transferred into that currency. That it would be the purchaser and wherever that money is going, those two jurisdictions? Or is that the point of having the main services in the digital world? So there's kind of like this governance that helps to maintain that transparency.
Yeah, the latter is exactly spot on. So the digital world creates a framework with multiple different councils that basically passes governance and legislation that everyone can be a part of or not. And then in certain regions, if they want to modify it, that's also a potential as well. The key is people can govern themselves based upon their own local, councils, if you will. There's no king, there's no president, there's no ruler. It's councils that come together and everyone has a vote. Just kind of like, and here I'll show you on the Mexican country environment. So you may have seen this before. This is the Mexican country that does identity health voting. We're going to focus in real quick on an example for voting. So I'm going to go ahead and say, you know what, I really like this dude. I would like to vote for that guy. And so it actually passed that vote through. You can see his 16 will actually shift up to 18. But no, I really want to transfer it over to this gal here. So I'm going to go ahead and transfer that vote because the date hasn't closed yet. So 5-factor authentication, you'll see my vote go from 18 with this Gerardo over to Mrs. Galvez here. So that's a vote. Now imagine within councils where people can have a voice. The most complicated thing in life, I believe, is actually coming up with the question. That's why AI, that's all it needs to suck out of humanity is what's the question? Because then they can go and do the research and then with deductive reasoning link a bunch of stuff together. The beautiful part of a lot of this is the way that identity works within this environment, AI can't follow. That is what makes this disruptive. That is what makes it different than the Bitcoins of the world. It's not that transactions are real time, which by the way, if anybody's got a wallet, grab your phone. I'm going to send you an asset. I'm going to send you native. So if anybody can grab their phone, I'm going to show the world how this actually works real time. Just
I have my phone.
just go ahead and turn on your video and then let me know when you're ready. And I'll go ahead and show the world how this kind of works.
I'm ready. My video's on, except it's on the side, but
But
it's
it's
not on the
not
main screen. That's
transferring.
weird.
Oh, yeah, that's one thing we have to have. We actually, in this particular system, we give away the ability to have, I guess, stability with video screen share, huh? Like, well, you can send in a number that can also be scanned, or there's multiple different ways to do it. Don, who has his video on, I'm going to turn mine off and see if that allows others to actually turn one on. Anyhow, we'll come back to that. So this is legislation. You can actually see, stuff that's in draft format, stuff that's actually been passed. Let's see if there's stuff. For instance, this is a process. I think this ties actually to what we're talking about. Voting, decision, implementation. This is particular for, this is the actual process to submit. So now let's see if I can find the legal framework. There's one around councils. This is around funding. These are actually the Pacific Union. So this is what they would have. To that last question, there's actually, for instance, the Pacific Union has a treaty with the digital world, which defines how they actually work. What's the integration? What's the tools? What's the structure? What are the services? How do they work together? All that fun stuff. So, and then, just like your question has really asked, and it's very intelligent, what are the services that can actually be done locally? The goal is to get them disseminated to the folks that are local as much as possible. And not only that, but vendors or merchants, they can take identity, they can take payments, they can take rewards, they can even do the dispute side of it. I'll give you an example. So I'm going to scroll down on Pacific Union. Actually, it's right here. You can see there's different vendors, and then the different vendors do these different things. This is decentralized identity. So this particular vendor would say, I'll take that. It's optional to do payments or rewards or disputes. Your question was around disputes, which is really good. So does all this make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
We'll go to the next question. Thoughts, comments?
I might just ask one more question, Michael, just on the voting. In some countries, you can't vote unless you are a citizen. What type of laws would be in place to allow a non-citizen of that country to vote in an election where their laws are already, you can't vote because you're not a citizen?
Really, really good question. That's brilliant. I'm going to also to go back to the Pacific Union on this, because we found in the Pacific Union, there were lots of questions that came up just like that. And I'm going to give you a couple different use cases. For instance, right here in Vanuatu, where's Vanuatu? Vanuatu, they basically said, we don't want a Kanaka Maori. Kanaka Maori would be the Hawaiian word for like white person. What do they call it in Vanuatu? Basically, if you're not from Vanuatu, which Vanuatu's been around for about 3,500 years, New Hebrides was what it was before. It was actually occupied by France and Britain. They kicked both France and Britain out and said, if you're French, Britain, or anything but Vanuatu blood, which is Melanesian bloodlines, they're amazing folks. Their hearts are just, they're actually recognized as the happiest culture on earth. But their message is, we don't want anyone voting that's not from Vanuatu. Another example would be down in New Zealand, where and this is actually what happens today, also known as their native word is Aotearoa. Their message in New Zealand is quite different than most other parts of the world. It's not like Vanuatu where you have to have bloodlines. Their message is, if you pay a power bill, you actually can vote. So we don't care if you have citizenship, residency. If you actually come here and when we're having our elections, you're paying a power bill, you use your power bill identity to actually log in and vote. So it's an interesting approach. But one thing that we found really unique, especially when we're talking about things like what we talked about here within the Mexican environment, built inside of the Life app, and I'm going to see if I can actually grab it here. I might not be able to because this is actually the version 1. Version 2, it'll actually show you all the different logins, which, by the way, John, if we could take a task, he might not be on, or Wally, if we could take a task to make sure that version 1 and 2 all default to the version 2 for the Life app installation, that would be great. But here's the point that I'm trying to make. Within this Mexican environment, the requirements built into the actual voting process could be tied to a percentage of time within a certain geography. So for instance, remember, this is a Life app. For instance, in this environment, it's called Mexican Life. You see this Mexican Life app here? This Mexican Life app gives one the ability to not only transact in the local currency, but to also vote within a particular region. But they have to actually physically be within that region. Now, what happens in the future when devices actually become very intelligent, but identity and privacy becomes very important? So for instance, let's say that someone actually is within the borders of the Mexican environment for over 51% of the time, and you can validate this in many different ways. I'll give you just one example of proof of life. And that's why the digital world is built on proof of life, not proof of work, not proof of space, etc. But let's say that someone says, I actually am willing to download an app and it will actually see all of the Bluetooth devices around me. For instance, just earlier today, I was actually testing a new application. Let's see if I can find it for you. I'll show it to you. For those of you that may not have seen this, this is actually a mesh-based, Bluetooth-enabled chat client. And I won't go through the details of it, but imagine if within the Life app, one was actually enabled Bluetooth and searching Bluetooth devices around you. So not only does it not know specifically where you are, but it also doesn't know the other devices, but it can actually prove that you were physically there. So it's not just, I guess you could, the same argument somebody argued with me a long time ago that said, hey, I just want to get a wagon full of 20 phones and turn them all on and then walk around the world. Well, the net is you actually have to operate. So you're proving who you are, but in so proving, it's not just a GPS, but it's also other things that you're actually doing within that particular region that can actually guarantee that you've been in that region. So for instance, in the digital world, if someone says, I actually want to have L3 proof. L3, level 3 around identity is basically you have gone into some type of a department, maybe a DMV. You've taken an identity, proven your address, proven your actual name. So birth certificate, utility bills for shipping. And then you've shown up, taken a photo, linked that to your physical ID. That's what they call L3. So let's say a voting requirement says you have to have an L3 endorsement. You have to have some form of a SETI or state endorsement, which is what we were talking about over here with this beautiful state endorsed digital ID summit that was coming up here in October. So you basically go through this process of validating all of these different environments, and then you can actually vote. So the Life app would allow you to actually vote. I personally believe this is absolutely the right way to actually do voting. Mike, what was his name? Michael Flynn argued with me over and over, and I swear Clay Clark misaligned with some of the efforts. I really like Clay Clark, by the way, but and Michael Flynn, but they were all about paper ballots. And my message was, no, we've got to get identity done right and then enable voting around identity. So I'm convinced that in our lifetime, we'll actually see cryptographic voting done from devices that are proving who the individual is, because the individual wants to prove who they are, because it starts with a decentralized identity. As crazy as that sounds, emphatically believe that that is the future. So does that answer your question? Which was an amazing question, by the way. But does that click in your mind? No. We'll go to the next question. Next question, thought, comment, anything? Any feedback or concerns around where this is going? Anything that may not feel right? Anything that may strike a chord that could be overreaching or disclosing or inappropriate? We're quiet today, huh?
Okay, Michael, I don't know if I'm going to say this right, but with all these different jurisdictions, can any of the jurisdictions mess with the founding principles, the foundational principles of the digital world? Can they mess with the integrity of because I mean the digital world is not true.
Can you ask that just one more time? Maybe I'm not understanding it.
Yeah, okay. So you've got the digital world, which is built on true and correct principles, right? So if all these different jurisdictions come into the digital world, they can't mess with any of the true and correct principles, right? Like they have to follow, like, yeah,
I see what you're saying. So let's say that Hong Kong comes in and says, we're going to deploy this, but we're going to do it under this type of a structure or change this. Right. The nice thing about the digital world is it's built on identity platforms and payment platforms that are true and correct. What people want to do with it, that's their choice. As far as countries, you'll notice that these are unions. So when we talk about these different environments, and I'm going to try and get this, I've got a couple mouses here going. When we talk about these different environments, the only one that's actually already structured, organized, operating, transacting is the European Union. And the European Union actually has some very strong laws when it talks about digital things, primarily around consent, around GDPR, and they're furthest down the road than any other ecosystem. The unions themselves, for instance, the American unions, you're starting to see, I think within the next 3 or 4 years, you're going to see an alignment, because a lot of it's being forced, between Mexico, the United States, Canada, and Greenland, all kind of coming together in one form or another. I hope it's not the same way that America went and took the Hawaiian Islands and what they're planning to do with Greenland. I hope that's not the case, but that's a different conversation. But these are unions, and the unions have councils, and the councils use this digital world process. Now, if the unions say we want to do it this way and that way, and everybody's unanimous, and the people that are basically using the system are only the ones that are actually tying into the Life apps and voting, then that's basically what they can do. The goal is to let people have choices and let technology enable those choices. Hopefully, virtuous choices rise to the top. Hopefully it's something that, the good part of humanity actually is what is selected. But I guess that's what they call democracy and a republic if you can keep it, right? So different conversations. But does that answer your question? Which is a really, really good question. I don't know how it plays out.
Yes.
In all honesty,
Yes.
everybody can make their own choices. The goal is this is a system that works for the Earth for at least 1,000 years, and so it's going to go through probably 10 different generations, and hopefully, over time they make good choices. But the question of good is always a perception of reality of the individuals, and collectively as communities, and in some cases states or providences or countries or kingdoms. So good question, though. Really, really good. Anything else, or thoughts or observations? Or I'm always looking for negatives, people that are seeing something that doesn't feel right, or it sticks out a wrong way, or we need to pay more attention to it in the development phase, or the policy phase, or the architecture phase. Any thoughts or comments? If not, we'll convene with the
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
How are you? All good?
Life is good. Life is good. Would you close us with a question and then with a prayer?
Yes. So
Okay,
my
okay.
question is very, very simple and very complex. So how many people do we need for each jurisdiction to have like a critical point, like to not use other systems? Did I make sense?
Yeah, it makes great sense. It makes really good sense. And I'd bounce back over to this kind of a chart, if you will. I'll zoom back out a little bit so we kind of to see it from a perspective of the world, even though this isn't a representative map that's accurate. Really right now, all it is there's a group of folks within a particular region that understand these things and are willing to say, you know what? We will put together a node, a validator, a storage infrastructure, and then an exchange. They don't even need to provide liquidity to the exchange. The system should do it on their own in time. It may take many years before that happens, but if it's built on true and correct principle where there's not some there's people pulling out rugs of projects all over the place. And if we don't do that, if it's an honest, and that's one of the things I love about Bitcoin, and I'll just say, who created the Bitcoin logo? Who created the blockchain before it? How did all these things get done? How was the awareness done? And did someone, or was 20% of Bitcoin taken off the gate? Was it mined? So when you really understand the answers to those questions, you'll understand that a simple system can be deployed. It's only a matter of time, but the cryptography needs to work. And I look at Bitcoin as a really good litmus test, proving that Bitcoin's cryptography worked. And the scarcity of 21 million Bitcoins actually brought in, $3+ trillion in value. And it's not just them. There's other currencies that are out there, so it's not fair for me to use that number. But the point is the rolling out the same way that Bitcoin was rolled out, where you've got mining infrastructure around the world. And what I'll do, no, I won't even go there. But you've got mining infrastructure around the world for Bitcoin. But in this environment, you don't need the mining. It's not proof of work. It's not some game to release the actual coins. It's the ability for the individuals to get involved and prove who they are to actually get the coins, which we'll talk a lot more about that. I have a document here. I want to say it's not that one, but this one. No, not even that one. This one right here. I won't go through the meat of it just yet because there's some other individuals we need to get feedback on. But imagine if there was an actual finite supply, but an infinite legacy of an asset that learned from Bitcoin, that then enabled the weaknesses of Bitcoin to become strengths. Real time, no fees, no governments, no banks, no delays. All of it built in for the better of humanity, scarcity and supply. But it's actually something that ties to systems that we're talking about with real governance, with real councils that can actually come together with the real individual in the middle of it, and then taking the centralized systems and helping them to become a part of this beautiful environment. I'll give you an example. Let's see. I think I logged out of that one. Let's come in here. Accounts, assets, currencies, equities, commodities, cryptos, rewards, and bonds. If you can pull all of these different environments together and do it in such a way where the individual actually benefits and the cultures actually benefit from it, I believe that there's an environment where a new type of asset can actually take hold and be able to realize and become the future. So I know that may not answer your question in whole, but if you want to ask it a different way, that's or
Because I'm more or less, I completely understand what you're trying to say in that way. But for example, in a particular case, like how many people do we need it to adopt for a certain region to make the transition to this new environment?
yeah.
Right now, for example, the elections for presidents in Mexico will be in 2027 because it's every six years instead of 4 like here in the States and in the US. So we were trying to use also this system as a backup because it has been compromised, the elections.
Yeah.
That's the main thing that I wanted to pursue.
Yeah, I mean, that in the Mexican environment, when we look at actually, and I'll just come down to the different jurisdictions within the Mexican environment, or really they're states. These are states, right? So we know that there's like out of all of the ones that are there's only like 7 of them that are actually on board with this particular Mexican country environment, right? So I think this is one of them here. This one. This is one that's here. I want to say this one is, but I might be wrong.
Mostly the ones in the north are more aligned.
Mhm.
The ones because the ones in the north are more aligned with the U.S. vision, and the ones in the central and south are more aligned to the other regime that is, let's say, compromised.
Yeah, so to be honest with you, I personally don't know a number, or I don't think there needs to be a number, as long as one individual or organization is willing to say, we want to stand up, a node. We want to stand up the infrastructure, a validator, a witness, a structure behind it, the ability for the exchange to work. And again, the exchange is an ecosystem that will tie to this digital treasury, which will actually help to facilitate different exchanges or even different markets to be able to come together and to transact with volume cross region, cross kingdom, cross the globe. It's one world that we're all operating in, especially when we're talking about digital assets. When someone wants to go and transact with someone else, so I'll see if I can log into one of these others. So and actually this is not a good one here. Let's see if this one gives me something. So let's say I want to get US dollars. Actually, let's see. Boy, these don't have a lot of trading pairs. You can see this to this, but when I actually go and do it, I don't know who I'm actually going to go do this trade with. You can see this one's only going from one asset to another, but you don't know what part of the world that's going to go to. And that's the point is, and that's why when people talk about why do you even mess with this digital world? Who cares? Well, when you talk about something that takes it from a level that is, and I'm gonna tie the basis of how we all get to physically operate. I'm actually gonna play this. So
for example, the third part of my question. Sorry. Like in this particular case in Mexico, for example, in the last elections, there were 60 million total votes, and the winner got 35 million. So it was, well, some people think that it was compromise and this and that. So in order for for us to be able to win the elections, imagine that 40 million people get all in the system, vote at the same time, put all the information into the cloud, into the blockchain. How can we prove that all those votes are exactly to like international instances or something to be able to make it more legit international and to say, okay, 40 million people, we already vote that this is what we wanted. Because even if we're not going to use the other system, so we're going to also vote for in the system that the government has, you know, but if that system is compromised and we have our own and we vote at the same time with that one, you know, because that's the objective. And in one moment, we all vote at the same time. Well, 24 hours, whatever, you know, period of time for people to log in or whatever. But do it at the same time. And imagine that in the case that we would be able to have the 35 million or 40 million people that we needed in order to win the elections in 2027, how can we prove to the world those votes?
The individual actually has an identity that's tied to them. I'll give you an example. So go to the digital world. I'll just grab, let's say this organization here. And let's say this organization, for instance, in the United States of America, well, I should say in Utah and Wyoming and some regions of the United Arab Emirates, they actually have the ability to have, I can't even see it here. Where's a good way to see it? When you click on this, you can actually see the individual identity version 1, some of the older systems. Actually, maybe if I go here, no. Oh, there's an ability. Actually, here, this is all messed up, but you can kind of see it. These are individuals. So these are lots of individuals that basically have the ability. If I want to see who this individual is, I can scan this, it'll send a request, and then that individual can say, I don't want you to see who I am, or I do. But if we dig into the individual, you can see, for instance, this particular individual, they'll have a reputation score that's tied to them, right? Similar to what we kind of saw here. So again, this is within the Utah pilot. So you would have, maybe, let's see, they've registered a vehicle. We haven't done many other things, but actually so they've operated. So you can send a request and actually try and see who the individual is. But the individual's private. I don't know if you know, in the United States of America, a part of the voting process is the individual's identity needs to be kept private. If there is an instance where someone votes and their identity is not private, the organization that is responsible for them voting, actually it's a fraud or a felony. So there's some pretty serious consequences that come from that, because the individual's identity should always be private. The question is, can you validate it and make sure it's an individual? And that's what we're working super hard with, whether it's around, state endorsed digital identity, or some of the summits that we're putting together, or some of the different jurisdictions, whether it's different states, whether it's different countries or regions or kingdoms or unions that can basically come together and have the individual own their own identity. Now, 2027, is it feasible by then? If someone wants the system to truly do it, it could do it. It could absolutely do it. So if we go back, go ahead.
I'm sorry, because the idea is to do what I write on the comments. Could you please help me to read it, because I don't want to mispronounce it.
Let's go see if we can find it real fast. Okay, here we go. So this is what he asked.
meetsakarmeet.com/clear.
We have the proposal to convene a new consulate assembly to draft a complete new constitution for Mexico. Wow.
Yep.
Yeah,
that's exactly the proposal.
Wow, that's huge. If that's the case, this could be a framework for you to actually do it, and then we basically just prove it out. So it's got to be cryptographically secured that the voting process happened. I look at Mexico as an amazing use case, and this is why. Within 12 months of the last election, 24 or 25 people were murdered, dead, gone, because they were running
Yep.
for president of Mexico.
Yeah, well, different elections, but yeah.
Oh, it wasn't the Mexican elections. I
Oh,
just
no. So it was the Mexican elections, but not for presidency. It was for different positions, like governors or municipalities but yes, there were 20 something, 30 candidates that they were murdered from all over the place. O sea, right now is the most dangerous zone in the planet.
Yeah, it's crazy. I think this is a really good example of how and where we should actually put our efforts and energy into helping to make it become a reality. I think that,
Yep.
This, and I don't know about you, but I would be behooved and very, very honored to be able to help build a system that solves some of the issues that have transpired. I don't know any other part of the world where 25 people were killed for running for office. And because they were running for office, they were murdered. I do see a similarity with the cartel that connects with leadership within the Mexican environment. And maybe that has some serious thing to do with it. But
Yep.
Voting is voting, and transparency is transparency, and privacy is privacy. The votes need to be counted. They need to be real. Go ahead. You're going to say something?
Oh, so exactly that idea. But how can we trust in the system if the system is compromised?
Yeah.
That's why we need this system. Because yes, we wanted to have a new completely government, but we cannot trust the government because the institution that was going to count the votes is also compromised.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right now.
What's interesting is some of the folks on this call, we actually started what's called an IT outsourcing company, and we actually centrally managed multiple different networks in not just 29 countries, but all 50 states in the United States. And we built a whole industry off of it, what's called the managed service provider industry. And the company we started named DirectPoint was ranked #1 in the world at it. And the reason that I tell you this is we basically were the third party that allowed a business owner, maybe finance or operating or executive, to be able to trust IT. Because when you hire an employee that says, we're going to manage your mail system, but we also have access to your mail and your accounting systems, there could be some problems. You're putting a lot of trust and power inside of that IT's individual's hands. And so when you take something like this, critical like voting, and you put it into a third party and you allow technology, and that's the value of what the digital world is all about. It's not just a bunch of code. It is an intelligently organized system that enables humanity to actually operate. And they get to pick how they operate. They get to pick what types of services they actually want to use. Here's the list of services again. Maybe it's just voting that they actually want to use, wherever it's at right here. Maybe that's all it is that they use it for. But this is a third-party neutral system that doesn't have a dog in the election, a dog in the fight, a worry. It's literally let transparency prevail. Let honesty prevail. Let's validate what's the requirements. Do they need to be in Mexico 20% of the time within a year? Do they need to be in Mexico when they actually vote? Do they, there's so many different simple things, and it's really easy to code into the application. So by 2027, we should absolutely be able to implement that. I can tell you that one of the goals within the life, or this I'm trying to get over here real fast, this Utah life environment is to actually allow the Olympics to come, and an individual can buy a plane ticket, they can get through security, they can get their bag, they can get their ride, they can get their hotel, they can get through the door, they can make reservations, all of it with this type of a system. Not that everyone has to do it, but they have the choice. and it's integrated within the state of Utah, from the vendors to the merchants to the airports to the different drivers, all of it integrated. Now, the Olympics aren't coming until 2034, so we've got a lot longer than you have within the Mexican elections in 2027. But the brutal reality is it has to start somewhere. And why not Mexico? Why not? 25 humans took their last breath because of an election, because they wanted to stand up for what they believed in was right. Why shouldn't we stand behind that and enable that, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
So with that being said, you want to close us with a prayer?
Yes, please. I would love to. So, I'm going to do it in Spanish. Eh?
Please, any way you want, but anyway,
Padre Celestial, te quiero agradecer de todo corazón por esta oportunidad de tener estas personas tan maravillosas, por ponernos en nuestro camino. Por favor, guíanos, danos tu iluminación, tu cariño, tu amor, tu protección, para poder llevar todo este mensaje de paz, de amor, de comprensión, para todas las personas aquellas que necesitan de tu guía, por el amor grandísimo que tienes para toda la humanidad. En nombre de tu amado Hijo Jesús. Amén. En nombre del Padre, del Hijo, del Espíritu Santo. Thank you very much, guys.
amen.
Amen.
Much love, everybody. We will see you next week. Thank you for tuning in and for listening, whether live or not. Thank you for being a part of the solution in a crazy time, but it's actually a beautiful time to be alive. Mahalo.